Alright guys, so this video I'm going to make a guide for using Shader Shaper, which incidentally is massively taken off. So I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody that's purchased it. It's put me one step closer to getting that Turkish hair transplant. So onto installation, very straightforward. Once you've downloaded it, drag it in to Blender. So drag the zip file into Blender and then just click OK. And then if you open up your preferences, you can see we've got the Shader Shaper installed. Now, the first thing we need to do is set up these paths here. So the module path is where the Python modules, Torch, Pillow, and OpenCV that this add-on requires will be downloaded to and unpacked. I'll choose this. And by the way, if you've already got these modules installed on your computer, providing they're installed in this version of Blender, and ideally is GPU accelerated, you can just specify the folder you've got them already in, and then skip installation. So I'm going to set this one up. And I've chosen a blank, I've created a blank empty folder and I've made sure it's got read-write privileges so that the add-on can actually, download them to it. The next one is the model path. So this is where you can put any of the downloaded models. I've already downloaded them, so I'll just choose the folder where I've already got them in. And to download these models, by the way, if you go to the Shader Shaper documentation, so click the documentation tab at the top there, as well as having installation instructions, it's got the AI model links here, which also describes the licenses and how you can check the licenses here as well. So once you've downloaded those, put them in this folder or whichever folder you've chosen. And then lastly, the image path. This is where the add-on will save the generated depth maps, normal maps, and bump maps to. So just choose a place for that. Okay, and then we've got the option here. If we are going to install the modules, if we've not already got them, we can choose GPU acceleration. So this will download the GPU version of Torch. And then we can just leave it on auto detect and it's going to find the version which is suitable for your driver. So if your NVIDIA driver or whatever has got CUDA 13, for example, although it's not listed here, when you click the install or update modules, it will get the nearest available compatible version of Torch that's got GPU acceleration for your particular GPU driver. If the add-on is unable to determine your CUDA version, then you can manually select it instead. And by the way, if you update now to Shader Shaper 1.51, I've actually made this a little bit better as well. Previously, it would only try and download the exact version of your CUDA that you've got on your GPU, but now it will actually search all the way back until it finds the most compatible one automatically. So that's made it a little bit easier. Now, before you click on Install or Update Modules, go into the window. Let me drag this across. Window, Toggle System Console. And by the way, if you leave this unticked, it will install the CPU version of Torch, which will work on all hardware. So if you've got a really old GPU or an outdated driver that you don't want to update, then you can turn this off and it will download the CPU version. And that also is necessary for Mac because Mac doesn't actually support GPU acceleration for Torch. So click on Install and then open up the terminal and you can see the modules have begun installing. Alright, so that finished in around about 3 or 4 minutes for me. If you've got a slow internet connection, it might take a little bit longer. And if you get any errors, you'll get a pop-up telling you what you need to do. But what we can do now is we'll just quickly check in this terminal. So we can see CV2 is installed correctly, which is this one, OpenCV. We've also got Pillow, this one here, is installed successfully. And Torch also has been installed successfully. So providing they all install successfully, if you check in your module folder that you've specified, you can see we've got these files here. So we've got the Torch files, we've got the Pillow files, we've got the OpenCV files as well, CV2, and all of the dependencies that those modules use as well. And if any of them fail to install, you'll get a pop-up as I mentioned before, and you can also refer to the troubleshooting section in the user documentation. Once that's all done, we can close preferences down. Just make sure you save your preferences first. And before we use the add-on, we'll need to restart Blender. Okay, so back in Blender, let's create a material for this plane. And we need to make sure we give it some subdivisions for the displacement. So right click, subdivide in edit mode. We'll just give it a few more. Something like that. And then Control 2 will add a subdivision modifier for us, just to make it a bit smoother. We need to add a texture, obviously, so let me drag in a texture. And we'll go with this one. Before we click generate, there's a few things we need to make sure. We've got a principal BSDF connected to a material output, and we've got the texture selected. We also need to specify the model, so any of the models that you've downloaded, and then we need to specify the quality. Now, the smaller models often do a better job with a lower quality. Not in all cases, but particularly if you are using enhanced, then the lower quality one is probably the one you want to choose. It'll be much faster as well. The enhanced option is what makes the smaller models produce higher quality results, but it's not always necessary, so it's a good idea not to use it unless you need to. And I would also recommend to only use the enhanced feature with the small model. If you use it with a large model, it will still work, but it will take a very long time. So I've not enforced that if people do want to play about and see just how high of a quality you can get if you use enhanced with a higher model, but just bear that in mind. The flat surface option becomes available when you tick enhanced. And what that means is, if you've got a flat texture like maybe brick wall, floor tiles, or these paving stones, for example, then you can turn flat surface on, and it's going to make sure there's less distortion in the height information. Whereas if you've got big hills and things, you want to make sure that's turned off so they don't get squashed inwards on top. Okay, so I can demonstrate some of these options. I'm going to turn enhanced off because this automatically fixes some of the things that we want to have control over in this demonstration. So choose the texture. This is going to be the one that's used to generate the displacement and the normal map. And then finally, you need to specify which maps you want. So do you want a displacement? If so, turn that one on. And do you want a normal map or a bump map? So choose there. And that's it. So we can click generate. And it'll be pretty fast. That's done already, as you can see there. And it's connected these nodes up for us. And it's generated a displacement. And it's also generated a normal map as well. So we need to go into material preview. I wouldn't use Cycles, interactive viewport for this. Cycles doesn't really update correctly because it stores the textures that we're modifying in cache, and that cache doesn't always get updated. So when you start modifying the parameters here, if you're in Cycles preview, you might get strange like spiky results, or it might not reflect your change that you've made. So always use material preview. Or if you're in a very early version of Blender that didn't have displacement in Eevee, then you are going to need to use Cycles. But if it doesn't respond or gives you strange results, just go back to solid view and then back to Cycles. But if you've got it, use material preview. All right, so this is the map it's created for us. Let's just plug the base color in there. And actually, I want to demonstrate something else. So let's just cancel this. It's going to put the tree back to how it was. I want to connect this up to a mapping node and UV coordinates so that I can tile the image. And we'll plug this into the base color. The reason I want to do this before I generate is because now when I generate, it's going to automatically connect those mapping nodes up to these for me so that I don't have to mess about doing it manually. And let's tile this, so Shift A, put down a value node. We'll plug this into the scale of the mapping. If I set it to 1, it's going to be 1 tile. If I set it to 2, it's going to be 4 tiles. And now we can see one of the problems with AI generated maps is that it doesn't give you a consistent height across the image. Now the add-on has already done quite a bit of stuff under the hood to make sure it's tileable, so you can see we're not getting any seams whatsoever. No visible seams on there. But what we need to do is get rid of this distortion. And for this, we can use the distortion size and the flatten distortion option here. And just before I do that, it's worth pointing out at this stage, you might notice that after you've clicked generate and the operator is running, and you've got finish and cancel at the bottom, parts of Blender become locked. And this is on purpose because it's very bad for Blender performance to leave these operators running. So I wanted to make it absolutely obvious that it's still running. And that means you can't do things like add modifiers, change modifiers, you can't go into edit mode, etc. All you can do, you can use the full functionality of the shader editor, and you can use navigation in the 3D viewport and the image editors as well. The distortion size is the fraction of the tile that you want to be classed as distortion, so the bit you want to remove or flatten out. So make sure, for example, if it covers half the tile, you set that to 0.5 or below. So if you've got a big mountain in there, you want to make sure this is set higher than the actual size of that mountain that you want to maintain. Otherwise, again, it's going to get squashed inwards by the distortion removal. So 0.32, this is sort of covering, I'd say about half or just under half. So I'll try 0.32. The lower you keep this value, the faster it's going to calculate. And then we've got the flatten distortion amount here. So if I set this to 1, you can see it started to flatten it. If I increase this even more, you can see it's got rid of it pretty much completely. Okay, so next up, we've got the output resolution. This determines the size of the texture in pixels. So I keep it low while you're tweaking the shape, and then start turning it up when you start working on the actual details, like the micro details and things like that. So these ratios have been chosen because usually in game engines, you want to choose a 1:1 aspect ratio, but at the bottom, you've got the option to output to the original resolution as well. Just bear in mind, if your input image is absolutely massive, it's going to take a long time to calculate. So I wouldn't personally go above 4096 by 4096, particularly when you're still tweaking the parameters. Next up, we've got the compressed top and the compression cutoff point. So this is used, if we look at the side of this model, 0 is the lowest point of the displacement and 1 is the highest point. So if I wanted to flatten them to halfway down, we can set this to 0.5 for the cutoff point, and then turn this to 1. It's going to completely flatten the tops down to the 0.5 point. Now, if you go too low, you'll see there are areas that I don't want to be this high. I just need to choose a slightly higher cutoff compression point so that the tops don't get pushed down to the same level. So if I set this a bit higher, maybe 0.56, that's going to maintain that height difference between the low and the high points. The compressed top now can be used to bring back some of the roundness. If we don't want it completely flat, we can bring that down to maybe 0.88, and you'll see it's going to bring back some of that roundness now on top of those flattened areas. Alright, so this is way too high obviously for the displacement. Let's turn this down to something more realistic, maybe 0.02, and now it more accurately reflects the height of the input image. And one thing to bear in mind is that when you're using the compression options, you need to make sure you've undistorted it sufficiently first if you want an even distribution. For example here, this is still distorted. If I turn the compression up, you'll see only those high areas are being compressed because all of these other areas are below the compression cutoff point. So if I undistort it first, I'm going to get the result that I wanted. Now I did accidentally leave the distortion on 5 for the rest of this video, and that's why there's some areas that are a little bit flatter than others. So the smoothing options, we've got the smooth seam and we've got the smooth all. So although the add-on will make sure that it's a perfect match in terms of height on the exact seam, and it will also modify the surrounding areas to get the best possible result, if the AI got it so wrong on different sides of the seam that the add-on itself is unable to fully resolve it, we can use the smooth seam option to blend those differences to make them unnoticeable. It's quite rare, and it hasn't happened here, but if I just to demonstrate what it actually does, if we turn this quite high, or even higher, it's smoothed out that seam, and if we turn on smooth micro details as well, we'll see the result even better. Just there. So let's just come out and get rid of this. So that's what it's done. It's smoothed the seam, and because we've turned on smooth the micro details as well, it's smoothed those out. If we turn that back off, you can see we've got those micro details back. Now the seam distance is how far into the image it's going to smooth. So let's turn this up to 40, the maximum. Give it a second. And there we go. You can see it's smoothed into the image. Let's just make this a bit obvious. And I can turn this smooth micro details back off, and we're going to get those micro details back. So this is useful both for correcting problems on the seam, but it's also useful if you've got a non-tileable input image that would otherwise create massive height differences around that area. So you can use this to smooth those out. Just bear in mind though, it doesn't modify the input image, so it will still be a non-tileable image. It will just make the height differences less obvious. Okay, so I'll turn these back down. I generally keep them something like 3 and 5, just to make sure there's no issues. Also, we've got the smooth all. Now the smooth all feature is pretty obvious. It's just going to smooth everything. So let's just disconnect that again. if I turn this smooth all right up, you'll see it now smooths everything out, but it does maintain the micro details on the normal map and also on the displacement map as well. So the most common use case scenario for this smooth all is to get rid of stretched faces on the side of abrupt displacement. Let's just boost this up a little bit. If we look on the side here, if I turn that smooth all back down, you'll see we're getting stretching now. We're getting geometry that's been stretched out because this is basically a 90-degree angle, so there is no information there, on the side. I mean, it's ridiculous how high I've got this stretched out using the displacement. It's almost touching the ground, but just to demonstrate, if I now turn this smooth all to something like 3, or even a bit higher in this case because it's so exaggerated. There you go. You see, we're getting much smoother geometry at the sides, and it's just going to give us a bit of a nicer texture. And this is me from the future. I'm just realizing now, thanks to the smoothing, that some areas were already too flat because I hadn't sufficiently undistorted it before flattening it using the compression settings. So just turning up the flatten distortion option has fixed that for me. So next up, let's look at the micro details. We'll start with the normal height and the normal detail strength. And to demonstrate this better, I'll just turn the displacement all the way off, so we've only got the normal map. The normal height is very similar to what we've got here on the normal map. So if we turn this up and down, you see it makes it look higher and lower. The advantage of doing it over here is that it's going to bake it into the texture so that you don't have to use nodes, obviously. If you're going to use it in a game engine, you don't want to be modifying the texture. You prefer to have it already set up correctly. And also it allows you to balance it more with the normal detail strength. So for example, if I turn this up high, it's going to amplify the height, but also the micro details. So to balance it out, I'll just turn those micro details back down so we get the height and a more subtle amount of detail to get a better result. If we increase or decrease the resolution, we need to modify this value here. So if I use a lower value, like for example 512, we need to reduce the normal height, generally. There you go. If I use a high one, so maybe 4096, you can see it becomes much flatter, in which case we'd need to raise this up a little bit, like so, and then we get all that height back. If you're using it in combination, the normal map in combination with the displacement, so let's turn this displacement back on, you'll notice we might start getting white areas of reflection on the sides. There you go. So you've got these white bits on the side, which are visible from some angles. This indicates you've got your normal height too much. So let's just turn that down. You see that's going to get rid of those problems. If you turn it right down. There you go. And we can bring the normal strength higher to bring some of that normal detail back. Now the displacement detail strength, this is more useful for adding sort of actual geometry-based roughness if you've not got a roughness map, because it's going to be a little bit more granular than the normal map, because the normal map actually calculates the edges of objects and things like that, whereas this is going to be a bit more noisy based on the pixel information. So let me just demonstrate that. If I turn the normal detail strength right down, and then we'll turn the displacement detail strength up a little bit. You don't want it too high, 0.03 for example. Maybe a bit higher than that, 0.08. We zoom out, make this completely glossy. You can see it's added actual roughness based on the geometry. Now the only drawback to using this, and the reason I don't generally use it, is that if you want to add a clear coat, so turn that clear coat right up, and I'll make the main material rough, you'll see the clear coat is rough, and I might actually want to have a smooth gloss over a rough surface. So for example here, I want this to be glossy on top. I can't do that with the displacement detail strength. So I'll turn that back down, and then I'll turn the normal strength back up instead. I'll increase this a little bit. You'll see we can. So we've actually got a glossy surface. Let's just turn the roughness down so we can see both. We've got the glossy, flat, smooth surface with perfect reflections in the clear coat, and then we've got the noisy reflections of the actual normals underneath that, whereas we couldn't do that with displacement detail here because it's going to add that's added to the geometry which the clear coat follows. It does sometimes look really cool though if you combine them together. And next up we've got the encoding format for the normals, so OpenGL or DirectX depending on what you're going to be generating these textures to be used in. So if you're using it in Blender you want OpenGL, Unreal I think is OpenGL, DirectX, Unity and various other 3D softwares. So choose whichever one you want, set your output resolution and make any final tweaks. There we go. I mean, look at that, that's crazy. To be able to get that much detail, if you consider this is probably 1 pixel wide, to get a normal map that detailed is insane. And there we are, so we've got a nice result. So let's just finalize it using either finish or cancel. So if you click cancel, the material goes back completely to how it was when you started. If you click finish, it's going to change these from being packed images that only exist in the blend file to actually saving to the location you've got set here, which by default is whatever you've set in the add-on preferences. But you can change it, of course, if you're going to be building shader libraries, you probably want to change this for each material you generate. Click finish. And now you can see this has become actually stored on disk. If we just go into the end panel over here, you can see it saved it to that location. And now we've got full use of Blender again, so we can start going into edit mode, etc. And then finally, just before we go, let's do a quick check of what the difference in quality is if we switch to the enhanced version. We use the same model that we've used for this one. So I've created a duplicate basically. We've got 2 meshes, as you can see here. This is the original, and this is the one, it's still the original, but the one we're about to redo. And if we turn enhanced on, make sure this one's selected, and we'll check we've selected the image node. We'll turn enhance on. It's quite a flat surface, so I'm going to leave flat surface turned on. And then we'll do generate. And it takes a little while longer because it's a much more in-depth analysis. And there we are, so it's finished. And straight away you can see we've got a much better result. So this area, for example, you can see the height, it's not exactly got it completely correct, whereas this one, it's nice and flat. Same for this one here. If we zoom in, you can see it's done a much more accurate job. And because the highs and lows have got more separation now, we can actually increase that cutoff point to get a bit more contrast between those high and low areas. And because it's done a bit more of an in-depth analysis, you can see we've now managed to capture more detail. And now let's do a quick test with the large model, which has actually got a whopping 300 million more parameters than the small model. And we'll see whether or not that small model that's been enhanced on the right-hand side can match up to the quality of that larger model. So I'll click finish to finalize that one. I'll select this one now, and we'll change the model to make sure we turn enhanced off. We'll change this to the larger model, and we'll put it onto the highest quality as well. This large model, or the larger models, often work better with the high quality. I would say though, these ones here, so the 512 and the 384, these work better with the medium one. So 512 is better with medium, and probably the 384 is going to be better with the low or the medium. Sometimes they produce weird results if you have it on too high. Alright, so the larger model selected, we'll click generate again, and we'll generate that again. And there you are. So you see, quality-wise, or result-wise rather, they look very similar. In fact, you could say, if we look here, the high quality one has not quite matched the quality of the smaller model, because the high quality one on the left, it just looks a little bit more curved on the right hand side of that stone, so it hasn't quite captured the height quite as well as that small model with enhanced turned on. So there we are. I hope that's useful for you, and thanks very much for purchasing the add-on. I'm presuming if you've watched it this far in the video, you probably have purchased it. So I hope you're enjoying it, and thanks very much, and I'll catch you in the next one.